Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So this is part 2 of the Brothers War set review. Today we're going to be doing blue. But before I get started, one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention at the start of part 1 with the white card review was that so this set review for the Brothers War are pretty much my initial impressions of the cards and how I think they could interact for limited or constructed. Of course, I'm calling on my experience from playing previous sets in the past and how they could possibly work, but we really won't know how all the cards are going to handle and if the evaluations are correct until we see them in context of how they play with other cards from the set for limited or with other cards in constructed from all the other sets. So there's possibility, with some of my evaluations that I could be totally wrong. And I know there's several examples in the past where that's been the case. But also, there's been times that I've been right about some cards and they ended up working out. And the evaluation of them turned out to be pretty good. But, like I said, you really won't know until we see these cards in action and how they play with other cards. And especially now, since the Brothers War pre-release actually comes out before Arena this time. I know they didn't do that with the Dominaria United. They actually had it released on Arena ahead of time, so we had a little bit of experience with it. But this time, they're truly making the pre-release come before the Arena and Magic Online release. So, with that being said, let's go see what the blue cards hold for us and see what kind of impressions they make and how we evaluate them. So first up are the commons, and our first card is Air Marshal for 1 and a blue. It's a creature, human soldier, 2/1 power and toughness. Has an activated ability of 3 colorless. Target soldier gains flying until end of turn. So the first blue card dives right into that soldier deck archetype that you could probably play for draft or even build for constructed. I actually kind of like this for limited quite a bit, and the fact that it's an activated ability you can pump to give multiple creatures flying, that's kind of cool, and that actually can help you with the game as the game progresses, especially if you're going to get things like power tokens and other sources of mana that you can sink into this card to give multiple creatures flying. So that them being soldiers. So I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, I think I'll give it a low rating. It's right on that line between low and mid. It is only good for soldiers, so it really becomes effective in a soldier tribal deck. In that case, I'd probably give it a mid-level rating. But overall, I think I would just give it a low, because it's just a 2/1 body, 2-drop, specifically for soldiers. But that's kind of what keeps it down. Other than that, though, I think it's a fairly decent card. But I think you'll see the most power for it in the limited format. Next up we have is Coastal Bulwark. It's an artifact creature wall for 2, power and toughness 1/3. It has defender. Coastal Bulwark gets +2/+0 as long as you control an island, and you can pay 2 colors and tap it to surveil 1. Surveil's rule text is: look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. So this is an artifact card in the middle of the blue cards. Wizards for this set decided to group cards with the blue color identity with the blue cards. Even though this doesn't have blue in the color identity, it just references islands. They decided to group it there, so it's just part of our blue review. But yeah, if you're playing blue, it basically becomes a 3/3 if you have an island, and you can use it to surveil. Not bad. Can help you manipulate your draws a little bit. Has defender. From what I see, they haven't continued the defender deck archetype in this set like they had in Dominaria United, so doesn't get any extra benefit from that. But I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. It has its uses, but I think there are other cards that you're going to probably want to put in your deck over this as a 2-drop. But you never know. If you're short on playables, short on 2-drops, this might be something you can slide into your deck for limited. And then for constructed, it might be a useful utility card for a defender tribal deck or something like that, or utility card you can use in your commander deck for defenders. So yeah, we'll go low across the board on that. Next up is another artifact with blue color identity. It's a Combat Courier for 1. Artifact creature construct. It's a 1/1 power and toughness. You can pay 2 colors and sacrifice Combat Courier to draw a card. And it has Unearth for 1 blue. Late game, it could be something you could sacrifice at end of turn to draw a card, then bring it back next turn to attack with it, and then before it dies, you can sacrifice it again to draw a card. It's right on that line between low and mid for limited. So I think I'll stick with low, but it's a high and low, and we'll do the same for constructed. It has its uses, but it is capped at where it's at as a 1-drop, 1/1 power and toughness. And you can draw a card if you sack it. So beyond that, it's a good utility card, but beyond that, I think that's the purpose it serves. So we'll leave it there at low for both of those format ratings. Next card is Curate. For 1 and a blue, it's an instant. You can surveil 2. And surveil again is look at the top 2 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on the top of your library in any order, and then you can draw a card. Yeah, that's pretty solid. It's a play on some of the other surveil cards that we've seen in the past. This could feed a few things. It could feed with the surveil mechanic. It could feed the unearth mechanic. If you have a lot of unearthed creatures, this is a good enabler for that. Good way to get through some stuff in your deck that's you really don't need at the time, but if you have a way to bring it back, it's not bad. And lets you manipulate what cards you're going to draw. Plus you get to draw a card. So I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it's pretty decent. I think it has a lot of good utility uses that you can get out of it for just 1 and a blue. For constructed, I give it a low rating just due to the fact that it competes with a lot of similar cards like it in the constructed formats, standard, commander, modern, pioneer, and all that stuff. So, but some people might find some use for it. I could probably see it getting more use in commander though. So we'll go mid and low for the ratings for it. Next one is Depth Charge Colossus for 9 colorless, or 9 generic. Artifact creature, it's a dreadnought. So this has 2 costs and 2 power and toughness. I'm going to read the regular cost for it first. Regular abilities, it's a 9/9 power and toughness. And its ability says Depth Charge Colossus doesn't untap during your untap step, and you can pay 3 colorless untapped Depth Charge Colossus. It also has the prototype cost. Just a quick reminder, prototype says you may cast this spell with different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types, and that's the cost for that is 4 colorless and 2 blue with a 6/6 power and toughness. So if you do cast it for its prototype, it'll come into play as it's a blue spell, and it'll come into play as a 6/6 blue artifact creature dreadnought with the same abilities that's on the regular text box for it. So this is a big card, kind of clunky. You have to pay 3 to untap it, but with a lot of power stones, you might be able to use this more than you think. And if you have mana rocks and you're playing a little bit more, say you're in limited, you're playing 17 to 18 lands, this might be a little easier for it to use. But it's big and clunky though. That's the only thing. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. I could be wrong, but it might be something that ends up surprising people a lot, but it can also be taken out pretty easily, it looks like, by disenchant or anything that destroys enchantments, or artifacts. So something to consider, but it is something that you might be able to use as a curve topper playing it late in the game to finish off your opponents. So same thing for constructed. You know, unless you're building a dedicated artifact creature deck with a lot of mana rocks and big creatures, this is going to be sitting in your hand for a little bit, even for its prototype cost. But you can see it getting some good play in Commander, though. That might be kind of fun to build a bunch of Titan-sized artifact creatures for your Commander deck and finding alternate ways to get them onto the battlefield. So, but yeah, I think for now, we'll just go low across the board for both ratings for both formats. Next up is Desynchronize for 4 colorless and 1 blue. It's an instant. Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on top or bottom of their library. Scry 2. Yeah, it's kind of another clunky card to play on Totally Lost from a few sets, various sets that come out in the past. Its mana cost is really what keeps it down, really. Something I probably wouldn't be playing that much. If you really need it, you could use it, but I think you might be able to find other alternatives. So I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. I don't see it really getting much play in constructed at all. More so in limited. It could see play in it, maybe in a cube deck or something like that, or some kind of dedicated deck using just all the commons from Brothers War or something like that. But other than that, I think that's about it. So we'll go low across the board for that, for both ratings. Next one is Balaji Archaeologist for 1 and a blue. It's a creature, human scout, 0/3 power and toughness. And it says when Balaji Archaeologist enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a non-creature, non-land card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on the Balaji Archaeologist. So this is the second card in that cycle of cards. We saw one like this for white, and this is the blue one. So it lets you mill 3 cards and put a non-creature, non-land card from those cards milled into your hand. Yeah, that might be pretty decent. I mean, it'll give you access to artifacts, enchantments, instants and sorceries. Maybe you might need a good removal spell, planeswalkers, things like that. So not bad. It's a good way to dig. And if you strike out on all that, you can just put a +1/+1 counter on it. It becomes just a 1/4. So I like it for its digging ability. And because of that, I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it could be pretty useful as an efficient utility card for your deck. For constructed, I'll go low, but it's right there on that border between low and low and mid. It's a human. That could be pretty useful in certain human decks that are dedicated more to non-creature, non-land cards. So something to think about. But I think for now, low is probably where I'd keep it. Like I said, it's just right on that borderline between low and mid. But I feel comfortable with that for now for these two. Next up, we have Kolos Rock for 4 and a blue. It's a creature bird, 3/3 power and toughness. It has flash and flying, and when Kolos Rock enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. Normally, there's that common in white that's a 4 and a white that's a 3/4 flyer. I think it's a little better than this card. I think I gave it a mid rating. But this one has flash, flying, and you can spit out a Power Stone token. So might not be bad. I'm going to be generous and give it a mid rating for limited. That might be a little high for it, but the fact that it has flash and flying and it gives you a mana stone, Power Stone, that's pretty good. The only knock against it is it's not a 3/4 versus a 3/3, and its mana cost is kind of high. If it was 3 colorless and a blue for 3/3, I would feel very confident giving a solid mid rating. But for now, I'll give it a tentative mid rating. But I still think it's worthy of that rating there for it. And I'll give it a low rating for constructed, just due to the fact that it competes with other cards that at the 5 mana value slot, they're just much better options. So kind of just leave it there. And I think that'll do it for this card. Our next common is Latnam Adept for a 3 and a blue. It's a creature, human wizard, 3/3 power and toughness. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Latnam Adept. Not bad. I don't know how often we'll be drawing 2 cards a turn. Maybe with that cantrip that we just passed, what was it, Curate, the one that lets you surveil. I could put extra counters on this. So it's kind of a build around in a sense. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited, but if you build around it, it's worthy of a mid rating. Possibly if you have a lot of cantrips, this actually could be a workhorse for you and could straddle that line between mid and high. But I think other than that, I would just give it a low rating for limited. You have to really build around it to get the most out of it. Same thing for constructed. There are better options at the 4 mana drop slot, so low is probably the best I could see for it in constructed. Next common is Machine Over Matter for 1 and a blue instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact creature. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Yeah, that's pretty good. There's a lot of artifact creatures in this set, so you're going to be able to cast this for just 1 blue a lot of the time. Because of that, and it doesn't just target creatures; it targets non-land permanents. I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating. I think that's pretty solid for a common. And like I said, you're going to be able to enable it quite a bit with having artifact creatures, them being actual creature spells or tokens, because it looks like this set spits out a lot of artifact creature tokens. I think I'll give it a low side mid rating for constructed as well. I mean, it's something you'll be able to enable quite a bit if you build around it in constructed, and it's a lot easier to do in constructed. So, and I really like the fact, and I can't emphasize it enough, that this targets non-land permanents, not just creatures. So that's the upside for it. And then if you only have to pay 1 blue for it, that's pretty decent. So I like it. I could see it where you might have one of your opponents might use one of the white enchantments to exile one of your non-land permanents, and at the end of your turn, you just use this spell to bounce that back to their hand. You get your creature back or your permanent, and you're in business for the next turn. So a lot of the common uses I could see for this card. So pretty solid. I like it. Good utility. Next one is Mightstone's Animation for 3 and a blue. Enchantment Aura. Enchant artifact. When Mightstone's Animation enters the battlefield, draw a card. And enchanted artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 4/4 in addition to its other types. Not bad. Yeah, it lets you draw a card. That's good. And so it replaces itself if your opponent gets rid of the whatever it's enchanting. And it turns one of your artifacts into a 4/4. So if you have a Power Stone sitting around, you can just throw this on the Power Stone and turning it into a pretty decent threat against your opponent. Plus you draw off it. So yeah, I like it. Pretty decent. I'm going to give it a mid rating. I think it's solid. It's something your opponent's going to have to deal with a 4/4 body. So in limited, I think it could be something you definitely want to have in your deck if you're playing blue and you have artifacts. So we'll go the mid. For constructed, I'll go low. There are just other options to choose from with this, unless you're playing with a dedicated artifact deck and you don't have anything else to put in for it. So probably see more use in Commander than anything else. So we'll go low for constructed. Our next common is Retrieval Agent for 3 and a blue. It's a creature, human soldier. Has a 2/5 power and toughness, and you can pay 2, and Retrieval Agent gets +1/-1 until end of turn. So you can, looks like you can pump this 4 times to make it a 6/1. If you have the mana for it. Might be pretty decent in the late game. Kind of clunky though at 4 mana. It's a soldier though, so that's pretty decent. That falls into the soldier archetype. So I think I'm gonna give it a low rating though for limited. But if you have it in a dedicated soldier deck that you've drafted or you somehow managed to build in your sealed deck, I'd give it a mid-level rating. I wouldn't mind putting this in there at all. So pretty decent. Because it'll benefit from other things that benefits the soldier creature type. So, but overall, I'll give it a low rating. Same thing for constructed. It's going to compete with a lot of other soldier cards, so I think it's probably its ceiling is at the low rating for constructed. Next card is Scatter Ray for 1 and a blue. It's an instant. Counter target artifact or creature spell unless its controller pays 4. Huh. 1 and a blue for instant, and it counters an artifact or creature spell. Not bad. And it's 4 is the requirement in order for their spell to resolve. I like this. I think it's pretty strong. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. That means for a 2-drop artifact or creature, they'd end up having to pay 6 to resolve it, if you think about that. So yeah, it's pretty solid. I would definitely like starting this in both a limited or constructed deck. So I think it makes a cut at a mid rating. Our next common is Stern Lesson for 2 and a blue. It's an instant. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Create a tapped Power Stone token. Yeah, this is pretty much divination at an instant speed. Then you discard a card, and you can get a Power Stone token out of it as well. And there's a lot of things you'll be able to bring back from your graveyard, like you could ditch an unearth card, or some kind of other artifact that you could bring back with some other spells. So pretty decent. I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. I think people will find good uses for it in the constructed formats as well. Has a lot of upside to it. Not much I can complain about. Our next common is Third Path Savant for 2 and a blue. It's a creature, human wizard, 2/3 power and toughness. Pay 7 to draw 2 cards. I think if you have a lot of mana producers, mid to late game, this will start drawing you cards quite often. At the end of your opponent's turn, you just pump 7 into it and draw 2 cards. And if you have a lot of Power Stones, that's going to really add up pretty quickly for you. That being said, it is a pretty expensive activated ability, so other than that is just a 2/3 body. I think I'd give it a low rating for limited. You're not going to really be able to use this ability unless you hit that apex of 7 mana, so until then it's just 2/3, so we'll have to see how it goes. See how this format plays out, see if mid to late game, oftentimes you're using mana into mana sinks, this card could be pretty good. But until then, I think I like it at the low rating. Same thing for constructed. There are other things you can use with your mana at the 3 mana drop spot, and same thing for 7. Unless you're playing a dedicated control deck and this is your only creature, which I highly doubt will be the deal. There are better creatures to use if you're only playing 1 or 2 creatures in your deck. So we'll just keep it at low for both of those. Next, our next common is Urza's Rebuff for 1 and 2 blue. It's an instant. You can choose one. Counter target spell or tap up to 2 target creatures. Yeah, it's pretty decent. It's a hard counter, or it's something that taps down your opponent's creatures to allow your opponents to get through or to prevent them from attacking. I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it's pretty solid at the 3 spot. Same thing for constructed. I like how they're making hard counters have multiple abilities now. That's kind of neat. They've done that a few times in some recent sets, so could be pretty useful. That being said, I think mid is appropriate for it. I think I'll just leave it at that. They definitely have their good utilities and good uses. Our next common is Weakstone's Subjugation for 1 blue. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant artifact or creature. When Weakstone's Subjugation enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, tap Enchanted Permanent. Enchanted Permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Not bad. It's kind of a different play on these freeze enchantments that they've been printing quite a bit lately. You can opt to just play it for 1 blue. If the permanent's already tapped, you just throw it on there and not have to worry about it. Or you can pay an additional 3 to tap something down that's causing you problems. So I like how it's got that modular option for it. So In limited, I like it. I'll definitely give it a mid rating for limited. I think it could be a useful removal spell against your opponents. So, and it's something I wouldn't mind starting in my limited deck. For constructed, I give it a low rating. There are just other things we can use as removal. If you're playing in a dedicated enchantment deck, I could see this being used. Might be more worthy of a mid rating then. And I could see it getting a lot of play in Commander as well. So, but for now, I think mid and then low for constructed. Next common is Wing Commando for 2 and a blue. It's a creature, human soldier, 2/2 power and toughness. It has flying and prowess. That's pretty solid. Wow. Talk about an upgrade for Windrake. This is pretty decent. I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for Wing Commando, and the fact that it's not an uncommon, it's a common. So I'd be happy to draw these and draft these in a draft deck. Give it a low rating though for constructed, just due to the fact that it's competing with other things in the 3 mana value slot. You know, unless you're playing a dedicated human soldier deck or a dedicated prowess deck, this card probably won't see much play in constructed. But I think we'll just go ahead and give that low rating for constructed. All right, I think we're on to the uncommons now. Defabricate for 1 and a blue. It's an instant. You can choose one. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. If a spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Or you can counter target activated or triggered ability. So it's a modular spell for, and it's basically got a null wrapped into it. And then you have also the option to counter an activated or triggered ability. Yeah, this could have some good uses. I like it. I think both for limited and constructed, I'm going to give it a mid rating. I could see this card being a solid sideboard card you bring in from your deck for both limited and constructed. And depending on how the format shakes out in limited, you might want to start it if you're seeing a lot of artifacts being played. And also with triggered abilities. And same thing with constructed. I mean, you're able to stop some crazy triggered abilities from happening. You'll be able to use this, or just outright counter annoying artifacts or enchantments. So, pretty solid card. Good use of it just for 2 mana. Our next uncommon is Flow of Knowledge for 4 and a blue. It's an instant. Draw a card for each island you control, then discard 2 cards. So it looks like they're doing a cycle of cards based on the type of basic land you control for that color. I know they had that white card that was similar to Swords to Plowshares. This is the one for blue. Yeah, that could be pretty crazy. You play in a mono blue deck, you have 7 islands on the battlefield. You could just draw 5 for 5 at instant speed, and then you just ditch 2 cards. Yeah, I think that's pretty decent. I like it. Give it a mid rating for limited as well. I think mid to late game, your hand is running dry. You just cast this and replenish your hand. So pretty solid. Can see this getting a lot of play in both formats. Next up is Forging the Anchor for 2 and a blue. It's a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of artifact cards from among them and put revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you dig for 5 and put any number of artifacts into your hand, and then the rest on the bottom in a random order. Not bad. Gonna have to be playing a pretty heavy artifact deck though. I think I'm gonna go low on this overall for both limited and constructed. However, as a build around, I would give this a mid rating for both limited and constructed. You're playing a super heavy artifact deck for both of those formats. I think it could definitely have its high utility for you. So, but overall, it's probably just a low. It's not something I'd have in every deck. So we'll go low and limited and constructed for this. Our next uncommon is Hulking Metamorph for 9. It's an artifact creature shapeshifter. Its regular text box says, you may have Hulking Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and its power and toughness are equal to Hulking Metamorph's power and toughness. Or it has prototype. You can cast it for 2 and a blue, and it's a 3/3, but it has all the regular abilities that the main text box has. So it's basically a clone for creatures you control that are artifacts or creatures you control. Interesting. Yeah, still pretty big and clunky though. I could probably see it being cast for its prototype cost a lot more than its regular 9 mana. But if you got 9 mana sitting around, draw this in the late game, your opponent's going to have to deal with a pretty big 7/7 creature that's a copy of something. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. Its main drawback is the fact that it costs so much. And its prototype, it comes in as a smaller version, but it's only a 3/3. If it was a 4/4, I'd probably give it a mid rating for it. But that can be blown off the battlefield pretty easy at a 3/3. So those are the drawbacks for it. I think low is pretty accurate for it for both those formats. Our next uncommon is Involuntary Cooldown for 3 and a blue. It's a sorcery. You can tap up to 2 target artifacts and or creatures. Put 2 stun counters on each of them. Interesting. Yeah, so that'll lock some things down for a few turns. I think it could definitely have its uses in limited. Probably give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, give it a low rating. There are just better options for 4 mana. But in limited, this would be a card I wouldn't mind using, drawing to slow down your opponent's forces. And who knows, you might be able to use this in the mid to late game to put the game away and attack for lethal and get the win. So give it a mid for limited and low for constructed. Next one is Keeper of the Cadence for 4 and a blue. It's a creature human wizard, 2/5 power and toughness. You can pay 3 and put target artifact, instant, or sorcery card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. It's situational. This is not going to help you all the time. This is pretty good if you've got your opponent has cards that are really bugging you, and you can kind of tuck it away at the bottom of their library, never to be seen again. Or if you have a way to getting it back into your library, maybe somehow shuffling it to the top. Good luck with that. Could be pretty useful. But other than that, it's very situational. And it's kind of clunky. 2/5 power and toughness for 5. I'm going to give it a low rating for constructed and limited. Just not much use on a consistent basis for you. So I think I'll kind of leave it at that. Next one is Splitting the Power Stone for 2 and a blue. It's a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact. Create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. If the sacrifice artifact was legendary, draw a card. Interesting. So you can sack a token to create 2 tokens. If you were to sacrifice Power Stone. Or if you sacrificed a non-token card like a legendary permanent, that's an artifact, you can draw a card. I think this is situational. You really got to be playing something that's dedicated to legendaries or artifacts, or the use of lots of mana for it. So that being said, I think you'll find good use for it in limited, and there might be archetypes that you can build around with this for. So I'll give it a mid for limited, and then we'll give it a low rating for constructed. It might be worthy of a mid rating as constructed if you have a dedicated build around for something like this, but until then, kind of want to probably leave it like that for Splitting the Power Stone. Our next uncommon is Spotter Thopter for 8. It's an artifact creature Thopter. Its regular text box says flying. When Spotter Thopter enters the battlefield, scry X where X is power, and it's a 4/5. Or you can cast it for its prototype cost for 3 and a blue, and it enters the battlefield as a 2/3 blue artifact creature, Thopter. 4 for a 2/3 flyer that lets you scry for the prototype, or 8 for a 4/5 flyer that lets you scry 4. I like it. I think the redeeming quality of it is that it's a 2/3 flyer for 4 for its prototype ability, and because of that, I'm going to give it a mid rating. For constructed, I just don't see it getting much better than a low rating. There are other things you can do with your mana, but for limited, I wouldn't mind throwing that into my deck and using it. If I have to, I definitely wouldn't mind playing it. Lets me scry and manipulate my draw. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Our next uncommon is Take Flight. It's an enchantment aura for 3 and a blue. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying, and whenever this creature attacks, draw a card. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. I think I'd give a mid rating for limited. There's always still the possibility that whatever you're enchanting, it gets blown off the battlefield before you attack with it. So something to keep in mind, but be able to get an attack trigger out of it at least once, that'll replace it. So fairly decent. Oh, but it does have flying too. Yeah, I think this would be stuck at I'd give it a high level mid, just right on the border between mid and high. Not a bad card, pretty decent. I'll go low for constructed. Don't see it being used that often in constructed unless you're playing commander or something like that, but I think you'll see more use out of it in limited. And like I said, could be something that right on that border between mid and high. Might even, after playing in the format enough, it might be worthy to be reevaluated as a high-rated card. Our next uncommon is Thopter Mechanic for 1 and a blue. It's a creature, human artificer for 2/1 power and toughness. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Thopter Mechanic. When Thopter Mechanic dies, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it looks like blue has this theme of draw the second card. So looks like there's some abilities that you can use to build around stuff like that. I think for a 2-drop, just the fact that it's a 2-drop by itself, and if it dies, you create a Thopter token, that's pretty solid. And then if you draw your second card, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it. I think the fact that it replaces itself is pretty decent. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. This is a card, if I saw it, I would definitely draft it. Pretty decent. Just barely makes the high cut, though. And for constructed, give it a mid rating. It really has a good redeeming value, the fact that it replaces itself with a flying Thopter artifact creature. So that's pretty decent. And then the +1/+1 counter is kind of extra gravy for it. Be interesting to see how this card performs in both formats. But for now, I think it's worthy of a high and a mid for limited and constructed. Next up is Urza, Power Stone Prodigy for 2 and a blue. Legendary creature, human artificer with 1/3 power and toughness. Has vigilance. You can pay 1 and tap to draw a card and then discard a card. Whenever you discard 1 or more artifact cards, create a tapped Power Stone token. This ability triggers only once each turn. That's kind of cool to see Urza get a young version of himself. His activated ability is kind of cool, kind of a little play on Jace. Yeah, if you discard an artifact card, you get a Power Stone token, and it has vigilance too. So you basically get a free attack with him, and you can still use the activated ability. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. It's right on that border between mid and high, though. Gosh, I really want to see the way the format plays out before I can go any better. Same thing for mid for constructed for it. If you're playing heavy artifacts, this card becomes even better. It's probably worthy of a high rating for both formats. So, but it also lets you loot for 1 and tapping it. So that's pretty decent. You know what? I'm going to change my rating for limited. I like this as a high rating for limited. Pretty decent. Even if you don't have an artifact, you can you can still loot with it. So that's pretty good. For constructed, I think I feel comfortable just leaving it at a mid rating. So, but yeah, Urza's Power Stone Prodigy could be a sneaky good card. So something to consider when you're playing it. Our next uncommon is Zephyr Sentinel for 1 and a blue. Creature human soldier, 2/1 power and toughness, flash and flying. And when Zephyr Sentinel enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature you control to its owner's hand. If it was a soldier, put a +1/+1 counter on Zephyr Sentinel. Wow, that's solid. Flash, flying, and create another creature you control. That opens up all sorts of possibilities for recasting a creature with ETB effects. Yeah, I like that. Give it a high rating for limited, and I give it a mid rating for constructed. Might be worthy of reevaluating it at a high rating in constructed, depending on how it plays out. It is a human soldier, so that could be even better in a dedicated soldier deck. So I really like it though. Yeah, that's a decent card. Definitely wouldn't mind drafting it or putting it in my deck in a Sil deck. So we're on to our rare cards now. Our first rare is Drafna, Founder of Latnam. It's a legendary creature, Human Artificer Advisor, for 2/1 power and toughness. You can pay 1 and a blue and return target artifact you control to its owner's hand, and you can pay 3 and tap, copy target artifact spell you control. Wow, I like that. That's solid. Worthy of a high rating right off the bat. For both limited and constructed. There's so much stuff you can do with this. You can save your artifacts if you have enough mana. Let's say they're being targeted and you want to save it from being destroyed. You can return it to your hand, or at the end of turn, return it to your hand so you can recast it next turn to get some kind of effect. Really solid. Plus you can copy it. Yeah, there's just all upside for this. Legendary, yeah, pretty decent. I think this card will see some constructed play and definitely some play in limited as well. Strong card for Drafna, Founder of Latnam. Next rare is Hurkyl's Final Meditation. Sounds ominous. For 4 and 3 blue. It's an instant. As long as it's not your turn, the spell costs 3 more to cast. Huh, interesting. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. End the turn. Exile, and so end of turn reads exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The player whose turn it is discards down to the maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end. Yeah, so it's just pretty much just slams the door on anything. So basically it costs 7 colorless and 3 blue if it's not your turn. Or if it's your turn, it's 4 and 3 blue. I think you could find some uses for this. Definitely have to have a build around. I think for limited, it's going to be the low end of the mid range. I almost kind of want to give it a low rating, but it does have some uses. I could see this being used as a way to reset the game if you're getting beat down pretty bad, and this is all you have. You got to play it, reset the game, and you happen to draw into some nice things. So we'll go mid for limited. Constructed, I think I'll also give it mid, but it's more of a solid mid for constructed. It's something that could fit in nicely in a control deck or a deck that revolves around setting up some kind of turn combo where you get everything returned to the hand, float some mana, throw something out, and threaten your opponent for the win. So we'll go mid across the board for Hurkyl's Final Meditation. Next up is Hurkyl Master Wizard for 1 and 2 blue. Legendary creature, Human Wizard Advisor. It's a 2/4 power and toughness. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Wow, that's a lot. So if you've cast a non-creature spell, you reveal the top 5 cards of your library. And for each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn. So you have to have cast a card of a certain non-creature type And you can, if you did, you can put a card of that type in among the revealed cards into your hand. Wow, a lot of qualifiers. And I think this is something that you really kind of got to build around. I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. I think this is something that's more easily pulled off and constructed. For limited, if you're able to do it, maybe in a draft deck, it might be easier to do, but you really got to build around it. Then I'd probably give it a mid rating. But if you're not able to build around it and draft, it becomes just a 2-4 for 3. I'll give it a mid rating for constructed because, like I said, you can build around it more and shape your deck and sculpt your deck to fit the triggered ability for Hurkyle. So yeah, I think I'll go low and mid for that. Next one is Sky Strike Officer for 2 and a blue. It's a creature, human soldier, 2/3 power and toughness, and has flying. That's cool. When Sky Strike Officer attacks, create a 1/1 color soldier artifact creature token. Tap 3 untap soldiers you control to draw a card. Wow, this is solid. Got to give this high rating right across the board for both limited and constructed. We've seen so far that white and blue do have a dedicated soldier deck type that we can build around. And this can get crazy out of hand if you've got other soldiers to work with you. And if you get enough soldier tokens on the battlefield, you can easily pay for the second activated ability to tap 3 untap soldiers to draw a card. So I like it. Solid card. Definitely is going to see some play in standard, constructed, and limited. So solid 3 drop. Our next rare is Terrasian Mindbreaker. I think that's how you pronounce it. Terrasian. Hope I got that right. For 7, artifact creature Juggernaut. It's a 6/4 power and toughness. Whenever Terrasian Mindbreaker attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded up. Wow. And it has Unearth for 1 and 3 blue. Wow, that's pretty cool. That 1 and 3 blue Unearth could be pretty nasty. That you attack with it. Let's say you get 1 attack from just a regular casting of it. They're milling half their deck, and I mean theoretically you could get like 27 cards in their graveyard on their first attack, and then if you unearth it, get maybe another 14 to 15 cards into their graveyard. Yeah, that's pretty solid. It is a little expensive though, so we give it a mid rating for both limited and constructed. I think you're gonna really have to ramp that out in order to get good use of it. Next up we have the Temporal Anchor for 3 and 3 blue, legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. Whenever you choose to put 1 or more cards on the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with Temporal Anchor. Wow, that's kind of cool. So any cards you scry to the bottom, they end up being exiled, and you can play those during your turn. So, that's kind of cool. Some good upside to that. It lets you instead of scrying your worst card to the bottom, you could scry your best card to the bottom and play that later during the turn. Although it does only limit it to just during your turn. So something to consider. It's probably on a situation by situation basis that you'll decide how to scry, but it also gives you the ability to scry 2 at the beginning of your upkeep each turn. So that's pretty solid. It is a little expensive though, so I think I'll be a little generous and give it a high rating for limited. I'll give it a high rating as well for constructed. It might be a little too generous for limited, but I think it's just good enough to jump into that high rating area. And for constructed, any kind of deck that's revolving around deck manipulation, as far as being able to manipulate your draws, this is an ideal card for it. So pretty solid. Definitely will have some great uses in Commander. It just screams Commander for me. Our next rare is Urza's Command for 2 and 2 blue. It's an instant. You can choose 2. Creatures you don't control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Create a tapped Power Stone token. create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And then you can scry 1, then draw a card. Yeah, this card has some pretty good use all across the board. It's got a nice combat trick to shrink the power of your opponent's creatures if you're play it during combat. Gives you a Power Stone token. Gives you a construct that benefits from having that Power Stone token. Or if you just need to draw a card, you can scry 1 and draw. So pretty solid. I'm going to give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. I wouldn't mind playing this in my constructed deck or my limited deck. So there's definitely some good uses for it. Okay, so it looks like we're in the home stretch now. We're into the Mythic Rares, and our first Mythic Rare up is Arcane Proxy for 7 colorless. Artifact creature wizard, 4/3 power and toughness, and it says when Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Or you can cast it for its prototype cost, which is 1 and 2 blue. And it's a 2/1 power and toughness. So, yeah, it's kind of neat. If you cast it, when it ETBs, you can exile instant or sorcery card from your graveyard with mana value equal to or less than its power and recast that. It's pretty... Honestly, I think this being used mostly for its prototype cost, and it can be pretty powerful. I mean, you can get some pretty good stuff going with it. And mid to late game, you could probably, if you have 7 mana available, you'll be able to take full advantage of it and cast instant sorceries, the mana value 4 or less. It's kind of the low end of the high rating, but I think I'll give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. Just due to the fact that it does have its uses. Early game, you can play it, cast a instant or sorcery with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard, and mid to late game, you can, if you're able to cast it for 7, be able to cast a instant or sorcery with mana value 4 or less. And if it does come into play, let's say you have something that makes it bigger, boosting its power, it can come in as a much larger creature, allowing you to cast a much larger spell. So, something to consider. It is a wizard, and there are benefits for having wizards and stuff. But I haven't seen anything specifically in this set, but there are things that can boost your creatures and stuff. So, just something to consider. But yeah, I think I'll go high for both limited and constructed for the Arcane Proxy. Next one is One with the Multiverse for 6 and 2 blue. It's an enchantment. It says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, and then once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So for 8 mana, you get something that kind of lets you play cards off the top of your library and cast one of those for free. Pretty good in late game. And if you're able to get this out pretty early, this could be pretty big. If you have a way of cheating it out onto the battlefield before you have 8 mana to cast it normally, that could be pretty powerful. I'm going to give it I'll give it a high rating for limited. It's possible you'll be able to pull it off in limited, but not as often. It's still something that you can play, though, if you have 8 mana, and just play a little bit more mana in your limited deck, and you'll be able to cast it. And then for constructed, I'm going to give it epic, because there's many ways to get this thing onto the battlefield sooner than just turn 8 with your 8th land drop. So, good card that comes to mind is Fight Rigging. That's currently in standard from Streets of New Capenna. You're able to get a creature with a toughness 7 or greater. You can hide away One with the Multiverse with Fight Rigging, and then once you hit that creature power of 7 or greater, throw this onto the battlefield, and you're in business for using the ability. So it's a pretty powerful spell. Definitely like it, and makes sense that you would have Urza as he achieves the Planeswalker spark in him. that something this powerful would come online. So pretty cool card. Definitely like it. Could definitely see a lot of play with this in Constructed and especially in Commander. Yeah, there's ways you can do some really cool stuff with this. Our next mythic is Surge Engine for 2 colorless. It's an artifact creature construct, 3/2 power and toughness. It's got Defender. You can pay 1, and Surge Engine loses Defender and gains this creature can't be blocked. That's cool. Or you can pay, and then you can pay 2 and a blue. Surge Engine becomes blue and has base power and toughness 5/4. Activate only if Surge Engine doesn't have Defender. And then the last ability is pay 4 and 2 blue, draw 3 cards. Activate only if Surge Engine is blue and only once. Interesting. So this is one of those level up cards, kind of like Figure of Destiny or Engineered Sleeper, I think that was what it was called, from Dominaria United. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The only thing that's interesting of note that you can draw 3 cards, activate only if Surge Engine is blue and only once. So it looks like you're not able to continuously use that ability, that last ability, but still, that's not bad. You're getting an unblockable 3/2 once you activate the first ability. For the rest, as long as it's loses Defender and stuff. So, and then you just make it into a 5/4 Surge Engine, I guess you could say, and then you draw 3 cards for 6. I think I'm going to give it a high rating for limited and constructed. I want to see it in play before I go bonkers with it. It is a Defender, so you got to be able to pump something into that. That's probably more achievable. The last ability, you definitely have to have the mana for it. So, yeah, I think a high rating for limited and constructed. And I think this is our last mythic for blue. So we're at the end here. And Teferi's got a lot of text on it. So Teferi is Teferi Temporal Pilgrim for 3 and 2 blue. It's a legendary planeswalker Teferi. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. First loyalty ability is 0 and draw a card. Second loyalty ability is -2, create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Well, that's pretty cool. And then -12 loyalty, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's hand. Wow, yeah, that's pretty wild. That last ability, it's almost like an upheaval, with the exception of it's just for non-land permanents, but pretty much just sends everything back to your opponents. And they shuffle everything back into the library, leaving them only 1 card in their hand. Wild. So yeah, Teferi's pretty decent. You can get you're able to draw cards, get loyalty from that, and then create tokens. And every time you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on those tokens. So that can get pretty powerful. And he has that static ability that keeps going, putting loyalty on him when you draw cards. So you're gonna be getting loyalty on him every turn just from your draw step. So pretty solid. I'll give it an epic rating for both limited and constructed. I think it's worthy of that. It's gonna be a tough card to get off the battlefield. Plus, you're gonna have creature tokens that you're able to spit out, and they'll get bigger as the more cards you draw. So pretty solid card. Could be tough to get rid of on the battlefield. So I like it quite a bit. So, well, that is it for blue. Next up, we're gonna be doing black. So tune in next time for our as we continue part 3 of the Brothers War set review. We'll be covering black. But if you like the video and you like the review we've been doing, you should check out part 1. It's the white cards that we reviewed. And if you like the videos, subscribe to my channel and YouTube, MTG Rogue Players. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you like the video, leave a comment. I always like interacting with my audience, but we're through 2 chapters of the set review for the Brothers War, and we've got 6 more to go. Next one is black. So until then, we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.